ado, our tonight's guest, he has had a storied career over 40 years, spanning over 60 novels, including a series of short stories and novellas. He is the author of such books as the Black Collar Trilogy, Cobra, and the Admiral Thrawn trilogy, beginning with 1981's Heir to the Empire. Please welcome Mr. Timothy Zahn. We have some friends joining us.
There we go. I'm told I have to bring them up here.
All right, Mr. Zahn, welcome to Rhode Island Comic Con.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. But yeah, well, so first of all, how are you feeling? I know this is your first time ever in the Ocean State, so how are you feeling?
I'm a little tired. Traveled across the sea from Shining Sea from here yesterday. Saturday we got the first cat we've had for a couple of years. Sunday she finally warmed up to when she would actually, be friendly to us. Monday morning she went in to get spayed. We are not sure if she's forgiven us yet. Our son is taking care of her while we're gone, and he sent us a picture of kind of sitting there. He's leaning over. We thought she was trying to groom. She had the cone of shame off. He was doing some grooming. We thought she was trying to groom her stomach, and he was keeping her from getting to the spot she's not supposed to be at. He said, "No, she's just fallen asleep." So apparently we now have a cat that can sleep anywhere. This could be useful.
Indeed. So yeah, we'll get into it. First question for you, sir. In May 1991, your novel Heir to the Empire made its debut at the top of the New York Times bestseller list, which set the foundation of what would become the Star Wars expanded universe. Can you tell us about how you received the opportunity to write a Star Wars novel, and what were some of your initial thoughts going into the project?
Back in 1988, Lou Aronica, head of Bantam Spectra, wrote a letter to Lucasfilm suggesting that since George wasn't doing anything more Star Wars, that Bantam would like to undertake a 3-book continuation of the saga, picking up after Return of the Jedi, which was an era nobody had been allowed to write in before. It took Lucasfilm a year to discuss this among themselves, talk to maybe other publishers or whatever. Finally, in '89, they got back to Lou and said, "Okay, let's do this. Find us an author. We'll talk contract." The Bantam editors sat down, made up a short list of authors they thought could handle Star Wars, sent it out to Lucasfilm. They liked my style best of the ones they were offered, and I got a completely out of the blue phone call from my agent in early November of '89 saying, "Tim, we have a very interesting offer here." The understatement of the decade, if not the century. So we discussed it for 45 minutes or so. I told him I'd give him my answer the next day. And you want my response? I panicked. I went off and panicked because this was a chance to jumpstart my career in a way I never would have expected. I had 10 novels at that point, 30 or 40 short stories published. This was going to jump me from mid-list, maybe lead author in a month, to something much bigger. It was also my chance to fall flat on my face in front of millions of Star Wars fans who would never forgive me for ruining their universe. I know it's hard to imagine, but try. I've also never done a trilogy before in the sense of a single story in 3 novels. I've done connected novels with the Black Collars and Cobras, but not a single saga stretching over 300,000 words. By the next day, I had enough of an idea. I said, "Okay, I can do this. I can fill this thing out into that length of story." I still didn't know if I could create Star Wars, but I thought I'd be a fool not to try it. Because every universe has its own feel. Star Wars doesn't feel like Star Trek, doesn't feel like Firefly, doesn't feel like Buffy. And if you can't capture the sense, I would not have a book, I would not have a Star Wars book. I would have an adventure of two guys named Han and Luke, which is not the same thing at all. But apparently it turned out I have decent ability to capture the Star Wars universe feel. So, bear in mind at this point, nothing had been out since Return of the Jedi in '83. So nobody knew if there was even any interest in Star Wars anymore. The fans were very quiet. Quiet fans look exactly like no fans at all. So Bantam wanted to print up 100,000 hardcovers for first printing, got the orders back from the bookstores and wound up printing 70,000 because clearly the bookstores didn't know whether there were fans out there either. I think that edition was sold out in 2 weeks. My editor said that they were going back for 60,000 more. Called the next day and said, no, we're going to do 2 runs of 30,000 each because out faster. So I think it convinced Lucasfilm and Bantam and everybody else, yes, the Star Wars fans are still out there. And by the time Heir to the Empire was out of the top 10 in the New York Times list, Bantam and Lucasfilm had a contract for 12 more books. And it just kept going from there.
Yeah, indeed. And one of your great creations, Grand Admiral Thrawn, he's became one of the most well-received villains and characters in all of Star Wars lore. What inspired you to create this character, and what was the creative process like developing such a notable villain?
Well, one of the things, or two of the things I knew right away was that I wanted to write something that felt like Star Wars, but at the same time, I did not want to go over the same territory George had done. So that meant no Death Star, no super weapon, no Vader type, no Emperor type. Okay, what's left? Well, Vader and Emperor manipulate, rule by fear. Somebody more dangerous is someone who can inspire loyalty. He will fight whether you're in the room watching him or not. So, okay, backtrack from there. What kind of commander will the troops be loyal to? Tactical strategic genius, so you know you're likely to win whatever battle you put into. Does not get emotionally involved to the point where he's wasting troops, killing people for no reason. You see you're losing the battle, pull everybody out, pick another time and place. It will take suggestions from subordinates if they're good suggestions, a bunch of things like that. And then finally, since we hadn't seen any non-humans in the Emperor's upper ranks, make him a non-human, because if he got to be one of the 12 Grand Admirals, he must be something very special. And that's basically Thrawn. Of course, then I've got to make it work and make him, you can't just say, this is a good commander, you have to show he's a good commander. And I would say that even if he wasn't just walking into the room with us. Your timing is impeccable as always, sir.
And you've also revisited the Thrawn character with 2 more novels, with 1997's Spectre of the Past and 1998's Vision of the Future, followed by a new trilogy of novels from 2017 to 2019. What was it like for you returning to Grand Admiral Thrawn, as well as seeing the character introduced in the current Star Wars canon in shows like Rebels?
Well, the short answer is, meh. No, it's always fun to write Thrawn. He's an interesting character. He's a challenge to write because, again, I've got to show that he is clever and tactical genius and all that. But I enjoy writing him. A lot of the fun of writing Thrawn is the reactions of the people around. You've got people like Captain Pelion in the original trilogy who accept who he is. You're not going to fight against him. In the novel Thrawn, that shows his rise through the ranks. You've got he serves under commanders some of whom appreciate his ability, some of whom hate him because he's smarter than they are, which is a stupid thing to do, but that's very human. So watching the interactions, watching the dynamics of his relationships with people. Eli Vanta was fun to do because this guy's going to ruin my career. Maybe he's not going to ruin my career. This guy's good for my career. And we're doing significant stuff here. So just watching that growth. But again, Thrawn is basically the same as I wrote him before. Everything he does boils down to the question of what is best to protect the Chiss ascendancy. It is, if working with the Emperor, working with the Empire is what's best, because that's the structure that's going to give me the military might I will need in the future, I will do that. If fighting against the Republic is the best thing to do because Thrawn has seen the chaos of the Clone Wars, he fully expects the New Republic to go into the same disaster that the Old Republic did. So the sooner we get them out of the way and rebuild the Empire, and I've got that military force, the better. So all of it goes down to protecting his people. And for that, I mean, it's consistent throughout all the Thrawn novels.
And also, can you talk a bit about your creative process as a writer? How do you engage world building and developing your characters, whether it's the Star Wars universe or a completely original work?
It's always, I mean, it's the same kind of format. You start with a what if, and then what are the consequences? What are, if you've got an invention, okay, what are good people going to do with this? What are bad people going to do? Because it'll get used in all different ways. If you've got a cultural thing that does this, what are the implications? How will that affect the rest of the society, the military, the politics? It is largely a matter of you come up with ideas and what are the consequences? What are some of the things that could happen? And once I've decided this is what happens to the culture, okay, consequences of that. And as you do all that, thinking that the world starts filling in and becoming internally consistent and feels real. Hopefully to the reader, feels real to me. Hopefully I get that to the reader as well. The Chiss ascendancy politics are very different from what we have here. But as far as I can tell, it's a stable system. Very hard for somebody from the outside to break into, as I showed in the books. But yeah, it's start with something and move on from there.
Absolutely. And also, during your process of writing the initial Thrawn trilogy, what were some of the biggest challenges, or perhaps like writer's blocks that you ran into creating that three-part series? And were there any ideas that you really fell in love with, but then ultimately had to leave them on the cutting room floor?
Yeah, the two big ones are that I wanted the Noggery to be the Sith, because one of the novelizations had talked about Vader being Lord of the Sith. And our Lucasfilm contact said, well, we don't know if George is going to use Sith later on, so you better change that. In retrospect, it's very good that they said that, because otherwise that would have been shunted off to alternate universe territory. The other one is that I wanted the insane clone Joruus C'baoth to be an insane clone of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And they decided, because when Luke is going to meet up with him, there's going to be that whole emotional subtext in there, the whole layering that, is this really Obi-Wan? Is reincarnation a power of the Jedi I haven't heard about? Who is this person? And they decided that was too weird even for Star Wars, and they said I couldn't do that. Again, in retrospect, if they had let me get away with that, the story Outbound Flight would have been very different and not as interesting, I think, because the part of the subplotting or some of the part of the theme of Outbound Flight was, why don't Jedi run everything? They've got the Force. Shouldn't they be the smartest ones and the most capable? And the problem is you can get an arrogance with that. I'm the smartest guy in the room. I know what everybody else should be doing, and that unraveling of the original sounding off in Outbound Flight was something I couldn't have done if that had been a clone of Obi-Wan. So those are the two major things. Wasn't really much writer's block, except when I finished Heir to the Empire, I was getting ready to do a full outline for Dark Force Rising. I had a short outline so that Lucasfilm could see where the story was going, but I didn't fill in a lot of details. I realized there is nothing much for Han to do in this book. Okay, we can't have a book where Han is sitting around, watching television and playing video games, like Thor at the beginning of Endgame. And I came up with the character of Garmin Beliblis, who had been working with Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, and had a disagreement, fell out with them, and now was kind of on the outside. It was a more civilized saga Rivera, really, in many ways. And doing that interaction, putting some history with between Beliblis and Han, made for a nice layering and a nice subplot in that book. Everything else I was pretty established. I told you I got the assignment early November of '89. By Thanksgiving, I had the basic story and outline finished. I knew where everything was going to be going. And in fact, I was sworn to silence, of course, but I had a couple of friends I shared the outline with so we could discuss it. And it was at a convention in Champaign-Urbana. We'd gone over to I think it was a Ponderosa at that. And we were sitting around wanting to discuss my outline, and we suddenly realized there's a convention 3 blocks north. There were fans all around us. How do we discuss this? And so we came up with a code on the fly. Luca's brother, Leia's sister, Han's friend. We could drop names like Mara Jade and Thrawn without a problem. Nobody knew of those, but we had to kind of invent a code for all of the other known Star Wars characters, lest we get from the diners next to us. So that was kind of fun. It was the first time we've actually done a on-the-fly code with, okay, we'll figure this out as we go. But yeah, it's always been fun to write in the Star Wars sandbox. It's a huge galaxy. There's so many stories you can tell. I hope I will continue to be doing them. I mean, you haven't asked that question, but I know it's going to be asked, so I'll go ahead and answer it. No, I don't know anything about Thrawn live action. They don't tell me anything. I offer my assistance periodically, and I get crickets back. And everybody wants to know what happened to Thrawn and Ezra Bridger after Rebels. I have no idea yet. However, once Filoni decides the end point of that 9-year gap by bringing Thrawn and Ezra back in, then I've got both endpoints, and I can pitch stories in that gap. But until Filoni decides, or more specifically, shares with me what he's decided, all of that is on hold. But I have hopes that they will get to that point soon, and I can get to work on something. I know Del Rey wants me to do any future Thrawn books. We had thank you. We had during the contract negotiations for one of the Imperial books, Thrawn, Alliances, and Treason, I don't remember which one, but my agent was talking with the editor, and part of an agent's job is to, make the author look as, important and as vital as possible. And so Russ said, well, if Tim doesn't do this book, who would you get to do it? I said, we wouldn't do it. Okay, so it's, I'm the go-to guy for Thrawn books as long as they're doing them and I'm willing to do them, and certainly a big yes on the second one. I'm not going to do a Conan Doyle where I No, I get tired of the character of Holmes, and I don't want to write him anymore. No. Thrawn is...
What did they do? They fell off the waterfall?
Yeah, the Reichenbach Falls, yes. That was a mistake on Conan Doyle's part. No, Conan Doyle wanted to be remembered for other of his works besides Sherlock Holmes. And I suppose I can understand that if you're trying to write for posterity. I'm making a living. I'm trying to have fun writing stories people like. If most of the people want Star Wars stories and I'm still having fun writing them, that's great. I enjoy it. I've got other projects of my own that a smaller audience likes because, frankly, Star Wars is the big attraction in my bibliography. But that's fine. I enjoy it. If I'm not remembered for anything, it doesn't matter. It'll all be gone. So this is, as long as my family's taken care of by royalties, after that, people can forget me. I'm fine with that. So the idea is to entertain you while I'm here.
Appreciate that sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. And at this time, we'd like to open the floor to the audience to have the opportunity to ask Mr. Zahn any questions. Any burning questions here? Anyone?
More than just the floor, he's opening the microphone.
Yes.
So I'm a huge fan. My name's Becca. I'm a huge fan. I've been reading your books probably since you were my first chapter book. So let's put it that
thank
way.
you.
I was less than 10 years old, I think second or third grade. And that was the Thrawn trilogy. I probably didn't understand half of it when I was reading it, but it was just so much fun, and it was such a great adventure. And my favorite character was Mara Jade.
Mm-hmm.
Was she an original, or did that come from somewhere else?
She was original. Pretty much everybody in the Thrawn trilogy that was not in the movies was my creation. I think Pash Kraken was the son of Aaron Kraken, who West End Games had invented for some of their source material stuff. But Pash himself was mine. So yeah, Mara's mine, Card, Gent, the computer guy who's completely oblivious to everything but his computers. He's got a following for some reason.
So that's my favorite. She's my favorite kind of villain turned hero, and my favorite villain other than Thrawn is the Yaxum Vaughn. They were so much fun. Was that something that kind of they came to you with, or with the Victor Prime?
The Yuuzhan Vong was something they came up with for the New Jedi Order, which I wasn't involved in. Part of that, Mike Stackpole and I, as they were nearing the end of the 12 books that Bantam had contracted with the Lucasfilm, we were going to pitch this continuing saga that wound up being the New Jedi Order. But before we could do that, there was a bidding war. Del Rey took the license from Bantam. All wound up as part of Penguin Random House anyway, so bidding against yourself, as it were. Mike helped steer the storyline for the NJO, but the Vong was created by that group rather than we hadn't specifically decided on what the villain was going to be.
Because it was so cool and so different from anything you'd ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
There we go. I think you said that Holmes was the inspiration for Thrawn and Watson was the inspiration for Pelion. How do you know that it was so artistically done? Is it your Reichenbach fall?
Well, to clarify, I was not thinking Sherlock Holmes when I created Thrawn. I was thinking just the military commander. But since I read through the Sherlock Holmes stories once every couple of years, that's in the back of my mind. So it just kind of flowed into the character, the observation, the deductions, the connecting the dots type of thing. But yes, in that sense, certainly Thrawn plays part of the role of Holmes and Watson and Pelion as the role of Watson. somebody to explain things to. You get the same thing with the Doctor and the companions in the Doctor Who series. You've got to have somebody to be the audience and hear the explanations and such. Do you remember more? Was there more of the question there, or just the?
How do you know that? But it was so
the artistically done.
Reichenbach. Sorry.
Well, okay, you're right. Yeah, I mean, the reason I killed him off, probably. If they want further on, I've got a fix for that. The reason I killed him off at the end was because, spoilers, because if the villain escapes, there's no closure, and I wanted these books to have a closure for this part of the saga. Secondly, if Thrawn lives, the New Republic is doomed. They will eventually lose. And third, by this point, as I said, we knew we were going to have 12 more books and other authors, and frankly, I didn't want anybody else messing with him. Fine. He is difficult to write for, so I just happen to have a knack, but then again, I know him personally. So yeah, it could very well fit with the Reichenbach Falls, yes.
I mean, the clone and the actor playing Thrawn isn't really Adventure of the Empty House, but it's pretty close. It's very, very good as well. So, I mean, that was really geniusly, artistically done as well.
Well, thank you.
I don't think too many people would. I mean, there was an entire movie where they decided to bring back a certain villain, and I think an actor and a clone would have probably done a better job of that.
We will not discuss anything future,
Of course.
just in case.
Also, how would Thrawn react to a very important porg?
Well, Thrawn would certainly not roast one and then not eat it. It is fun kind of to look at things in the Star Wars movies. And what would Thrawn have done if he was there? For example, what would Thrawn have done if he was in charge of the first Death Star? And I got an answer. When the lieutenant comes up to Tarkin and says there is a threat, Tarkin just kind of dismisses him with a wave of the hand. Thrawn would say, specify. He would find out about the vent, and then he would turn to one of the TIE fighter commander and say, have one of your fighters sit on that vent. Have a TIE fighter just sit there while we work on something inside. And then there are no movies 2 and 3 because everyone's dead. In Rebels Season 4, when Governor Price blows up the fuel depot to try to get Kanan Jarrus, what would Thrawn have done if he was there? He would have seen the Jedi and his group, the group of people on top of it. He would have instructed the TIE fighters that are incoming, lower turbo laser power to 1/4, start heating up that tank that they're standing on. Not enough to blast it, heat it up. When it's sufficiently warm, blow the top off that particular tank. The explosion now goes up, not out. You get the same result and you don't blow up your fuel depot. So, and there's nothing after that because everybody's dead. Hi.
So, in Outbound Play, in the thank you section, you write that you play Trivial Pursuit with Michael Stackpole, and I just wanted to know if you ever did end up beating him.
Did we ever play it again? This was a charity thing at a convention. We each had a stalwart Star Wars fan on our team. He and his fan were more stalwart than me and my fan. And the R2-D2 droid kept giving them the right thing, which I still think he probably gimmicked. But I don't know if we ever played again or not. It just, yeah, the convention disappeared, as conventions often do. But No, I'm content to be in second place. You're less of a target that way.
Well, thank you. That was something that was just in the back of my mind.
I discovered books when I was at a getting my braces, but the doctor had a magazine, Time magazine, with the Heir of the Empire full page splash page ad or whatever, being like a million copies sold or whatever it was at the time. Just before the softcover came out.
What?
Before the softcover came out.
I'm thinking the hardcover of each of those ran around 300,000.
Right, so it said over 1 million copies sold.
Oh, yeah, softcover,
Yes.
yeah. I think all three of those have hit the million mark.
So my question, which I'm seeing a lot of your panels and stuff, and don't see a lot of people ask about this, is your pursuit of a doctorate in physics a big help in your writing science fiction, especially in like having to deal with physics in fictional physics galaxy?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. I mean, a lot of the physics, I do know physics. I talk about books occasionally having a surprise guest star in physics. But largely, the schooling helps with understanding how science and technology work, what the blind alleys they go down, just how to make a technology feel like a real technology, something been invented, feel like something that actually could exist. So yeah, just the scientific method and such. A lot of people are taught in school that when you got the sun-centered model of the solar system, suddenly all the epicycles and things that had to do with an Earth-centric one stopped, and it didn't. The Copernican system needed almost as many epicycles to make the planetary motions work as the old one did, because he had written this out as circles, not ellipses. Once they figured out it's an ellipse with the sun at one of the foci, now we can make it work. But it looked like it might actually be a dead end until they figured out what was actually happening. And this sort of thing happens in science all the time. We tend to gloss over those. But just the knowledge of that kind of thing can help me with the technological, plus along with, of course, the whole, what are the consequences of this new science, this new technology?
Does it drive you crazy when people make physics so wrong in science fiction and you're not trying to correct what they're writing as a fellow writer, but you're like, Jesus Christ, have you done any of your research before writing this? I mean, do you ever get super critical of something that you're just like, you need to stop writing, or at least stop writing science fiction?
I try not to be, but it's really hard. Did I mention how much I enjoyed The Expanse? Physics was a continuing character in that series. No, I do appreciate when they get it right, and when they get police and weapons and everything else right in a movie or TV show. But so often Hollywood just, nobody will notice, nobody will care. Yes, they do, and yes, they do. But yeah, watching science get mangled is painful. Usually has me stop watching that show too after that.
So welcome to Rhode Island. I did speak to you earlier too,
Yes.
but sort of a continuation on. I know you'd mentioned earlier you might be working on another book in the Conqueror's universe,
Mm-hmm.
and as a fan of not just the Star Wars stuff, but a lot of your other stuff. What other projects are you looking into or working on now? Anything that you're at liberty to tell us?
Well, the logjam, for 20 years after I wrote The Icarus Hunt, I wanted another novel set in the universe, but I couldn't think of a story. During COVID, when I had no conventions to go to, I started working on something. My agent suggested that this long after the original, it's good to have new protagonists. Came up with a couple of those, I could write some of the old characters in as well. And I broke the logjam, and I now have, let's see, Icarus plot is out. Are 3 more contracted for, 2 of which are done, and 1 is half done. And I think I can finish the saga in 2, possibly 3 more books. So that one is going pretty well. I would like to go back to the Conquerors. I'm continuing with the David Weber collaboration with the Manticore Ascendant, Manticore Ascendant, Call to, it's various things. Call to Vengeance just came out. won the Dragon Award for Best Military Science Fiction this year. Yay.
And physics bound.
In what?
And physics based.
Yeah. And there's Weber's Autoverse is another good example of making inventing a technology, the gravity field generation and control, and how would people use this? What would you do with it? And working through all those, this is the kind of thing you can do with such things. One of my favorite examples of that, by the way, from other entirely different movie is Back to the Future, where at the end of the first movie you've got a flying car. In the second movie you've got hovering skateboard. Because that's what people do with technology. You figure out how to lift a car, somebody will miniaturize it and put in a skateboard. Because that's how it's done in the real world. So yeah, it's fun to see technology done right, fun to see science done right. Yeah. And aside from those, nothing else really going on. Still ready to pitch some ideas to Lucasfilm. My editor is very busy. Lucasfilm's got all these other projects they're doing. But at some point, hopefully I want to write more books. Del Rey wants me to. I assume Lucasfilm isn't tired of me yet, but who knows.
And we all want to read more.
And we'll just see what happens. But, you know, I've got work to keep me busy for the next couple of years.
Thank you very much. I shall turn the microphone over to the Admiral now.
Admiral, looking very good.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for always incorporating physics and science in as finishing up the PhD and a minor in physics and pick holes, and I like the fact that I can't ever pick holes in yours.
Oh, thank you.
My question was...
It's just to comment, it's very easy to let your science, everything get to such a level that the average reader can't follow it. I don't want to ever do that. The story is predominant, but don't screw up the science when you're putting it in. Yeah, okay.
Where did the inspiration for Thrawn to be so into art and culture come from? Because it's kind of like the two sides, the logistical side of his brain, but then the arts, cultural, and where did that inspiration come from?
The original inspiration was I wanted something he could do that other people couldn't. And I kind of keyed off of the Force as something Jedi can access and understand. Nobody else really knows how it works. So the idea was this is something he can see, he can use it as a tactical tool. Nobody else really understands it, but it's something unique to him. Interestingly, at another convention, someone said, well, he'd do better than art. He would do better to read the myths and legends of a people, because that gives you a real look into the psyche. The problem with that is he either has to be fluent in that language or read it in translation. And that means there's a filter in the middle. The art is just there, as originally it was made. So I think it works better, certainly works better for him to read the artwork rather than history or something. In fact, in Thrawn Treason, I made a point of music is another form of art, but usually it goes through so many filters and interpretations, it's not really very useful to him, unless you've got the artist and the composer and the director, conductor are the same person. Then you can start feeling what that person's doing. But you need it to be as unfiltered as possible.
Thank you. And I have one of my 501st Thrawn cards for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
And we do have time for one more question.
Hello.
Hi.
I was just wondering, when working on the original Thrawn books, I'm sure you had an idea of like what his voice sounded like in your head, but then how did that compare when hearing like the Rebels animated version? Just out of curiosity.
As a matter of fact, I almost never hear voices or see faces of my characters. I see them in terms of attitude and personality rather than face and voice. So when people say, who would you want to play Thrawn? Someone who can capture that global awareness, that sense of being 5 steps ahead of everybody else, the courtesy, Thrawn would never say, you rebel scum. He would say, I understand you. I sympathize, but you are my enemy, and I will destroy you. The way he dealt with Hera in Rebels, very much that's the kind of thing. So I don't hear a voice, but I very much like what they did with Lars Mikkelsen in Rebels. In fact, a nice subtext to that, I'm sure somebody thought of this at Lucasfilm, but my thought on that is that by hiring a Danish actor, because English is not his first language, like Basic is not Thrawn's first language. So Mikkelsen doesn't have an accent per se, but there's just a slight difference in cadence from a native English speaker, I think, that makes it feel like this is someone, an alien, which is perfect, because that's exactly what the character is. So I think that was genius to get him to do that role. The current rumor is that he's going to be the live action Thrawn, but at the moment that's just a rumor. Typically, when you see it on StarWars.com, believe it. Otherwise, hold it very loosely. But I know he would do a great job in the live action. So we'll see what they do.
Thank you. Okay. And we actually do have time for one more question, gentleman.
Yeah, I'll actually ask what I was going to ask, which was
Quickly,
inspiration
get one.
on having somebody examine and analyze the art of their enemy. But yes, I have to borrow your cat's cone of shame because I actually am behind on everything. I haven't finished with one sentence series yet. But I did want to say thank you very much because I discovered this series because I saw your name and had liked all of your works with Star Wars as well as the Ogre series, the original Icarus. So thank you very much, and I want to speak for everybody for all the work that you
do. Let me just say in turn that writing these books is the most fun thing I've ever done in my life. And I appreciate you guys for allowing me to make a living doing it. In every writer's life, there are 2, 3, 4, or more times when they think their career is over. I've had at least 3 of those. The sales are, the publishers may not be wanting you anymore. The sales may be down. It looks like nobody wants me anymore to be doing writing. And years ago, when I had the last one of these, I sat down and think, okay, what else would I like to do? And there isn't anything. There are many things I could do and I would do if I needed to feed my family, but there's nothing else I want to do. So again, you guys are the ones that make this possible. Thank you for doing this, and for buying the books, enjoying them, and I will keep writing as long as you guys keep reading. Is that fair?